Salutations everybody, it's Matty here once again, and we're sitting down for more RPG goodness from Obsidian. Our field day continues. Now we're talking about the Outer Worlds DLC, which finally, after months and months and months of yours truly begging, we are getting our Outer Worlds DLC. We have a better idea on the plans for Obsidian's expansions to this game. Polygon, believe it or not, has a pretty good article on this DLC with an interview with members of Obsidian, so we get some more information there. We have some official resources to go over, like Obsidian's website, on top of yours truly going full speculitis and picking out little details from the trailer itself. So there's a ton of information to go over for Obsidian's Outer Worlds DLC. Let's get it started with that Polygon article. Peril On Gorgon is fully integrated with the main campaign. This isn't a quarantine zone where the DLC content is neatly separated from the main game. The crew of disaster companions the player picked up on the Unreliable are coming along for the ride, along with new dialogue, interactions, and reactions to the events on Gorgon. This includes big players from the original campaign, like Felix, and the smaller members of the crew. Cheerful ship robot Sam, in particular, gets a little more attention. Yes! Yes, Obsidian! Yes! Oh my gosh, that last sentence, yes! Sam has so much potential to be the HK-47 of the modern age, and they did not embrace it in the base game. There is a redemption arc unfolding right before our very eyes. Do Sam some justice. I want our little robo friend to be super cool. They also mentioned Felix. This is another companion I felt was pretty underwhelming in the base game. I voiced that in my review, and I hope that they do round him out a little bit more, that they take an opportunity with this DLC to build characters that just didn't have either as compelling of a story, or they didn't really inject them into the main story enough with little side comments and things that built their character. So just like what we've seen in the past with prior Obsidian DLC, such as New Vegas, this is going to be naturally integrated into the main story. I like this. I think it's a lot more interesting for players. I think it works well for new players coming in. Believe it or not, there are still people picking up New Vegas for the first time ever, and having all of that DLC being integrated into the game, they can pick it up at whatever time they want to throughout that story and then finish it at the Hoover Dam is quite honestly one of the best parts of how they produced that entire package. So I'm happy they're carrying this same idea into the Outer Worlds. The entirety of the Peril On Gorgon DLC will last about as long as the Monarch hub in the base game, which is about 6 to 8 hours long. It's a, quote, substantial, end quote, chunk of gameplay, but the player won't spend all their time on Gorgon. They'll have to return to previous hubs and check out old zones, as well as delve into dungeons. Now, if I remember correctly from my original playthrough, I spent about 10 to 15 hours on Monarch doing all the side content, the main story content there. That was the bulkiest part of the entire game. That's where a majority of my time was spent. I remember beating it in almost exactly 30 hours, and a good chunk of it was spent on Monarch, at least 10 hours. So maybe this is based off their experience. It doesn't sound like they're directly saying that it is 6 to 8 hours. I would say if they're comparing it to Monarch, expect it to push past that 10-hour mark, because I think that would make a little more sense comparatively speaking. Now, because it's connected to the main story and everything that's happening in the narrative, it does make sense that sometimes you're gonna go off planet. I don't know right now how I really feel about that though, when we want new experiences, new adventures. Like, I think of Old World Blues. That's not pulling me out of the big MT to go to some location in the Mojave Wasteland, right? It's about the big MT. And that's not to say that Gorgon won't have that. It's just something that, I don't know, I'm gonna have to figure out how I feel, and we really have to wait to play the game for that one. Gorgon's overworld is a canyon with a Spacer's Choice facility built into the cliffs and slopes, so players will have to traverse up and down. The entire planet has a noir vibe. Think detectives entering a world of marauders and underworld crime. Unlike planets like Sweetwater and Monarch, Gorgon is a pulp adventure with a big mystery to solve. Since this is the Outer Worlds, there'll also be choices to make. Oh, Polygon, I've got to do this. It's Edgewater, not Sweetwater. Yep, I'm gonna be that guy. Sorry, Polygon, but I know how the internet works. You need to be corrected there. I'm here to do the job, no problem. I'll take the fall for this one. When it comes to the DLC and what we just read, I think it's really smart what Obsidian's doing, because the game is based mostly around conversations. That's the superstar of the game, making choices, talking to characters, learning more about the universe. It's nice that there's first-person shooting gameplay and that there is character building there. And there's a lot to appreciate about the Outer Worlds, but I think that's the core of the game. That's the superstar of the game. So to base it on this interesting mystery with Adrena Time and the origins of this drug and potential murder mysteries and suspects and all that stuff, I think is overall really smart because it identifies they know what makes their game work. It's up to the player how delicate they want to be while navigating this mystery. The team has plotted a puzzle that could be solved even if all the suspects were murdered by the player. A kill everyone run was a major headache to manage in the main game, but Obsidian wanted to ensure that this was a well-rounded narrative with plenty of leads and ways to solve the primary conflict. There's one particular possible murder that, as weird as it sounds to say, I'm really proud of the team. I don't want to spoil it, but when you try it, you'll know it when you find it, Patel adds. It's really fun having to design around this implication of knowing that the player can show up, kill the primary quest giver for the first time before you even get to talk to her, and then having to design interesting, engaging fallbacks for that inevitability. Because it is an inevitability. Everyone will take any opportunity they can to make our lives a little harder with that stuff, says Matt Hansen, project art director. This is what we love about Obsidian. They go through hell to make sure that, you know, the 5% of us who want to do a kill everything run want to play the game over and over and over and constantly break it. This is how they earn the legacy that they have. They constantly consider the player and the choices they're going to make. So I'm happy to say that is carrying over into the DLC. Let's keep reading. Patel notes that there are no mustache twirling evildoers, but Obsidian offers characters with strong points of view and asks the player to decide which party will be more successful. It's less about the purity of intent and more about navigating the complicated system of Halcyon. The intention is that the player will head to Gorgon in the later stages of the game, before everything is locked for the final run through the endgame. But the perks and flaws that players can unlock on Gorgon have advantages outside of Gorgon itself. Some of them are designed to be a powerful bonus that can make combat, quote, pretty silly, end quote. It doesn't seem like there's going to be your standard villain at the core of this plot. It's more so the mystery is the plot itself. I kind of like that. I feel too many games try to create that good versus evil. You're the protagonist, that's the antagonist. Chase them down because antagonist. I'm happy that they're just creating a story here, which maybe for them as artists is what they feel works best for this DLC. Because it's really hard to create a compelling villain in the amount of time that we're going to be playing this DLC. Now, they did mention their own perks and flaws, so that is also going to be in this DLC. There's new weapons, new armor, new perks, new flaws, so plenty of unlockables, new science weapons, which we'll showcase a little bit later. Lots of beautiful new additions to the game that you can carry out of Gorgon and back into the base game. Although it is designed for the later game, I imagine that means like right when you finish up Monarch, which means you still have Byzantium to explore, and then there is the final part of the game. So if Gorgon falls in between there, it should be good. There will be 3 new science weapons. So far, we only have the details on one, which you're seeing on screen right now. This is the Pest Extermination Tool, or PET, which is a melee weapon that can pull enemies in. So it's great for when enemies are running away from you. Furthermore, it's kind of like a pike, which I thought was pretty dope. Last but not least, Peril on Gorgon will release on September 9th, 2020 for the PS4, Xbox One, and PC for $15. Players can grab an expansion pass for $25, which includes the Peril on Gorgon and the next Outer Worlds DLC. The expansion will release on the Switch at a later date, according to an Obsidian Entertainment representative, so the Switch players are covered, and they're still patching that version of the game. So I think the price sounds pretty fair on paper. Let's say it's about 8 to 9 hours of gameplay for 15 hours. I think that sounds solid. If it's anything more than that, I'll be very pleased just content-wise. I imagine it'll have an interesting story to tell. It'll have a good charm. I remember during my first ever playthrough of the Outer Worlds, I laughed it up. I thought the game was hilarious. So I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of comedy they drive into some of the writing, that the dark humor that this game has sort of become known for. But let's keep reading on. There was an interesting bit of detail on Obsidian's official website. An increased level cap. Obviously, as I mentioned, additional perks, flaws, new armor sets, and several variants for existing gear. Plus, dig into the story of the Gorgon asteroid with a new portable phonograph audio log that reveals the salacious secrets of a scientific experiment gone wrong. So here's where I get a little concerned. A lot of games tell their stories through these audio logs. One of the cool parts about the Outer Worlds is you're talking to someone pretty much all the time. And when you're not and you're learning about the world, it's through text logs, it's through reading. Now, since you're on an asteroid, and I imagine since this is a failed experiment, there's gonna be a lot of dead people, not a lot of people to interact with. So does that mean most of this story is gonna be told to us through audio logs? See, I don't mind audio logs like BioShock, where you have the main story, you have things you could pick up that tell you more about the world, and it's supplemental. But when it's the core of the storytelling, you get Fallout 76, and that's not something I want. And maybe 76 has kind of diluted my vision of what a actual good audio log storytelling device could be, but I just fear that they become overly dependent on that. Okay, so now it's my turn. I went through the trailer for the Outer Worlds Peril on Gorgon DLC. I tabbed through frame by frame, trying to see what little details were in there, and I found a couple that are worth discussing for sure. First are the armor sets or variants of said armor sets. It doesn't really matter too much because you don't see your character unless you have the game paused, but still something that I wanted to point out. Here is an overhead view of the asteroid Gorgon that we will be going to, and this is more of a ground level view of it all. It does seem relatively big. I think horizontally it doesn't seem that large, but we don't know how many buildings we can go into, how many quests are packed in here. Did the quests take us out of Gorgon constantly? Now, this was probably the most major discovery I feel I made out of everything when I tabbed through the trailer. So as you can see here, we're looking at a brand new set of armor that has a Firefly on it. Now, I pointed this out in my pre-launch coverage that the Fireflies were a ammo manufacturer in the Halcyon system. Now, this is the first time we've seen them represented on armor. This is the first time we've seen someone, a part of their corporation, attacking the main character. So I really do feel like they are going to play some type of role in the narrative here, or they're going to have a reason for being on the Gorgon asteroid, and that will once again build out the universe even more. Last but certainly not least, there are new creatures to battle, but pretty much, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we've got for the Outer Worlds DLC. It's just a little bit over a month away until we can play. You guys know me, I'll be covering it as we get closer to launch, between information that Obsidian decides to let out, interviews, and I'll be reviewing it. You guys know me, I've been so hyped for this DLC. I've got to do diligence. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you all have to say in the comments down below. Do fire away. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. Big thank you to all of the patrons who continue to kill it with that support. I appreciate each and every single one of you, and I'll talk with you soon. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.